suppose it goes without saying you spent a long time at Wendy's as the CISO there, around 8 years, I believe.
Yeah, right at 8 years. Yeah, that was interesting. I joined Arby's restaurant group, which is another U.S. chain for those not in the U.S. And we acquired Wendy's like within the first year I was there, and so it was funny because first I turned the job down, and then the right recruiter called me and sold me on this exciting opportunity. Because my first thought was, I don't want to work for somebody who has low profit margins. Like, how will I ever get budget?
Restaurants, yeah.
They sold me on the opportunity, and it was a great ride. I had a great boss. I reported to the CIO there, which can be problematic for some folks, but I think what made our relationship great is it really was a relationship. And throughout that experience, not only did we learn from each other, but really was probably the first program that I had built from the ground up at a publicly traded company. And, the great support and the teamwork there really allowed us to be frugal, not cheap, and put in the right solutions for the company. And that's, one of the things I always, I guess, pride myself on is taking an approach that's right for the organization and not just like, hey, let's do best in class, because, a restaurant company is very different. If you take a point of sale down, the world ends and you have the CEO literally calling your desk asking what happened. So it also taught me to not forget my roots in operations and think about the downhill effect of how the program works, and how do we actually replicate this in a big way, and then how do we do that with a small staff. We had a project there, for example, where we were managing vulnerability management for not only corporate, about 1,600 locations across the US and Canada, but also franchise locations. We took a program that was originally like 16 to 20 contractors, and eventually within like a year brought it to 4 people maintaining all the patches, antivirus, and system updates across what would have scaled to 70 or 80,000 systems before I left. We were doing about 40. And I think just, thinking back and looking, not only being able to drive that efficiency and really show the business, hey, we've taken 16 to 20 jobs and reinvested them into some better projects that actually drive revenue. And we've taken this one thing that's maintenance of business, but also critical to security, and we automated it to the point where it was just kind of set and forget. And it was just contrary to, I guess, what I thought going into that role, right? I thought I was going to have this real issue of getting support. But I think the important thing, and I think what I've come to realize over years, is there are lots of times I didn't get support. But as a CISO, as a security leader, it's really important not to give up on things if you truly believe, and a lot of times know, this is something that the company needs to do. As this is a major problem we need to fix. Being able to go back and tell that story a different way and be able to help the business understand that, hey, look, if we do it this way and we invest this money this year, this is what it'll net over the next few years. I think that really served me well. And by the time I left, Wendy's had outsourced, after I left, about a year after I left, they outsourced all of IT except for the security team. The gentleman that had taken over the team after I left came in and basically inherited a fantastic team. And they were so good at what they were doing, and the program was so well ran that was the team that they kept, because they knew they couldn't outsource security. And I take that as a secret little win too, right? Because a lot of times people would go the opposite direction. They want to outsource security. But, because we built an efficient system and we focused on things that really fit to a hamburger business, we weren't protecting diamonds. But also, we were able to leverage within the business a lot of things like, Wendy's loves their customers. They're all about family and all about those values. And so you bet I use those every time I had a discussion about, hey, this isn't going to be important to our customer. So, it was a great run. I left probably about a year after the franchise breach. and it was a good time to leave. I spent a little time after there doing some consulting, which for folks experiencing burnout, I highly recommend. It was it was nice. It was nice to go in and share all your knowledge and help someone solve a problem, and then walk away. And if they did it or not, no one was calling you at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah, the buck doesn't stop with you. You just give your piece of advice, and but certainly sounds like there was a lot to be proud of. From your time at Wendy's, evidenced by them keeping that team and inviting you back for advice, which is fantastic. Would you say that that time was particularly formative in the way that you approach the CISO role, but also maybe you even had to kind of invent areas of work for yourself, because I know it's kind of sprawling out these days, and CISOs are overwhelmed. But how were you managing that?
I'd definitely say from an executive standpoint, it was very formative because I had been at like Witness before that, and when I left there, they were right at $700 million a year as Verint when they were acquired. And even though they were a $700 million software company with 1,300 employees, it just wasn't quite the same level of executive requirements as when you go into Wendy's, where the officers meeting has 200 or 300 people in it. And all of a sudden you really have to learn how to navigate the politics and the people. And so it was a huge jump in my career. And also my mentor there, the CIO was former PepsiCo guy. And so I got a little bit more exposure into kind of how, the really, really, Fortune 100 type companies are doing things, but also how to work with their leaders. And so, I think those soft skills really, really developed over that time. And plus, Wendy's had great leadership courses and lots of training. So it really, I felt like, put me in a position that when I left and, Optiv was sending me into large clients to have difficult discussions or be part of their breach response team, it really helped me in that aspect, and I think it's funny, as I look through my career, one of the things I tried to do to keep myself, I guess, not only grounded, but also motivated is trying to figure out, like, what am I getting out of each role? And I think that's so important, as a lot of times we go into a role and it's not 100% perfect, but really understanding. And for that role, for about 7 years, it was a fantastic ride, and I do think it made a big change, because also that scale and having that scale, and where every time you bring a solution, like, how many hamburgers do we need to sell to pay for that? And that's astronomical when you start going, about 1 million hamburgers to pay for this. But it also taught me the value of not overemphasizing risk. And, it's something I had always felt strongly about, but I really started to see, because also it was 8 years in a security role, versus at Verint Witness, I had kind of progressed into it. So this was 8 solid years of being in this role, and to be able to look back and see that because of my transparency and because I gave them options, this is what happens when we do it, this is what happens if we don't do it, and here's kind of a compromise that'll get us part of the way there and reduce our risk, that because I had such a consistent record of that, as the years went on, it became easier and easier, and the company trusted that when I bring them some saying, hey, we have got to address this, they were ready to listen all the way up to the executive staff. So, it was a great experience and a fantastic group of people. I'd still say hands down one of the better teams I've worked with in my career.
Fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of emphasis on that, being able to communicate effectively to the C-suite, why something should be in place, that, what the ROI is on, procuring this piece of, data security software, for example, that doesn't necessarily, you can't immediately see the ROI from it, but it's kind of like, well, what's the reputational damage? What's the downtime damage, and all these other things. So, yeah, I think some IT professionals perhaps struggle with that somewhat, when there's not like a clear kind of chain of command, as it were, if you don't have like a dedicated CISO, and it's just kind of the IT manager or the IT director just fighting a million different fires, you know.
Yeah, and I think all of us have been there, and I think the biggest advice I would give to those folks is take a step back and really make sure you understand what the business is trying to accomplish. Make sure you understand what your competitors are doing. Because I'm definitely against fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but I totally think as folks responsible for the security of an organization, it's our duty to share that, hey, if you're in trucking, this is what happened, at Yellow Trucking. This was this big issue. We have similar things. It's not about fear, but about really education. And if you can tie into, like at Wendy's, it was, hey, look, these are our customers, and we know that if we don't retain them, these things would happen. It is hard, and it is if you take no the first time, I think you're going to fail long term, or at least you're going to be very dissatisfied. And one thing I learned early in my career is the reason I went to things like, the now Gartner, but Avanta events and the local all security things and listened to blogs and read things was sometimes just hearing somebody explain a problem differently than you do can be so helpful. And I found that I've been told no, and then come in 3 months later and pitch the same idea a different way. And all of a sudden I'm getting funding for it. So yeah, it can be frustrating. And I think that also for me has been a driving force I don't want to work for a company that doesn't have interest in getting better. Because I spent some years at companies where, I was always no, and just make it happen and get what you can get done. And, I think if you're passionate, which most of us, if we're successful, you're passionate about what you do, it becomes very demotivating and quite frankly, can just really start to cause personal damage if you're in a role where you're not having success and you're not actually getting the support you need. So I also encourage folks that if you're stuck there, put some time in, put the effort in. And if you see the needle move, keep going. That means you're having success, but it also means you're learning and growing. If you're hitting a brick wall, there may be a time to look for something different. Find somebody who really wants to hear what you have to say.
Definitely, you need that kind of buy-in into your abilities and the advice that you're bringing to the table. I suppose a lot of that, it helps being able to deliver things in a certain way, being, confident, like somebody like you with, good presentation skills, for example. So, it still takes, quite a bit of leadership as well to stand up and say, we need to implement this and, bring out recommendations like that. So, 100%. I think all really key points there.
Yeah, I think, if you don't mind, one last point.
Please.
I do think one of the things I forgot to mention, that if you're in that situation, if you can convince the company to do some type of a self-assessment, some type of a external assessment, security assessment, that's really, if you're hitting your head up against a wall, unfortunately, sometimes the external view will get you what you need. One of my programs, I actually used a free survey that like KPMG put out, and I just answered all the questions, and they gave us a risk assessment. So I think if you're in that position, try to find a way to get a third party to help you pass that message that, hey, look, we've had some work to do here.